Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Feed the Beast on the Mindcrack Fanserver. Feed the Beast server. Yay! Hey, you like those turbines? They look pretty damn cool, don't you think? I really like them. I never really checked to see how much power it puts out, but it seems like it puts out a pretty good amount of power. It's a little inconsistent, but that really doesn't matter because it's all about keeping the battery boxes charged. But enough of that. I want to show you what I have been working furiously on. Just wait. Oh, what's this? Oh. Something's coming. Ooh. Ah. It's working. It's a little rickety right now. As you can see, it almost looks like I'm about to fall through the floor of the ceiling, which I have a couple times, but it's finally kind of at a stable point. But yeah, how cool is that? Awesome. The speed seems kind of inconsistent because I spent a lot of time tweaking it to try to get the fastest speed that I could. Here, let me show you guys what kind is going on here. But yeah, it's cool. You hit the touch screen, you hit the floor that you want, and then when it arrives at the floor that you want, it'll give a beep, a little chime, and then it'll open the doors just like a real elevator. It's freaking cool. So let's go down here. I did make a couple changes to how this kind of runs. I took out the solar panels. They're way at the top, and I'll kind of explain the thought process of that later. But for now, where's my hole? Here it is. So you'll notice I took out the block breaker and the placer. And the reason for that was actually because of the fact that I had to wait for it to place a block or break a block in order for it to move. It slowed it down. And then I also discovered that if I tried to make it go really fast, and if it was like, for instance, going down and breaking blocks really fast, then sometimes what it would like screw up the block ID. I once opened up the placer inventory, and I saw that it had a blank item stack. It was like an item with no icon, but it had a stack. And when I tried to put it in my inventory, it completely crashed me, and I actually had to have one of the admins go in and like actually update my player file and remove the item from my inventory because it would not let me connect until that happened. So, or as long as I had that item in my, yeah, it was bad. And according to them, it was just like almost like a corrupted, the item got corrupted or something, or broken or whatnot. So I didn't want to deal with that. So I did away with those, and I tried to work on the timing of when this pulses to try to get it as close as possible here. Let me show you sort of what I got going on. I'll just break this wall for a second. Okay, let's call it back to the first floor. I got a couple seconds to get back down here. See if it'll show it. Yeah, it's not showing the lights, but I tried to time it to get the pulse right as soon as the block hit. It was really difficult to get that timing because if it pulsed a split second before the block hit, then the block would hit and I'd have to wait a whole another pulse cycle for it to, you know, move it down again, and it was causing it to move really slow. And I don't know why it's slow now, like where it's going to almost seems like it's going a block at a time. Sometimes when I get on, it runs very fluidly, and sometimes it's kind of like this. But I guess I can't complain. It works. It works. So I'll close this back up. And it works well. You know, the only issues I had, like originally this light was right here. And so it was only a too high area. And that gave me some problems because, like, sometimes when it was being rickety, if I lagged for a moment, sometimes I would end up on the on top of the elevator, and sometimes I would end up below and just fall. So, oh, I do want to kind of show you. I was taking you up to the third floor just now to show you what I've been doing there. But before I do that, I do want to show you kind of what happens, like how this all works. So let's bring this back down to the first floor. We'll just kind of watch it, I guess. Yeah. Wish it could go faster, but with the multiplayer lag, I can't complain. It's still pretty cool. So, let's go back down into this hole. I'll show you once it gets all the way down. Okay, there we go. So I'll terminate this and just show you the code, really. So it has, unfortunately, this computer has to have RedNet open at all times because it's receiving requests to actually move the elevator. So what it does is, now this right here, set wire, is just a function so I can easily pulse the different colors in the bundled cable that you see over to the side. So moving up, well, here, let me go down to the bottom. The very bottom. Okay. So here's the main loop of the program. And all it does is it simply listens for a RedNet request. And it'll be a couple things. It could be a number. Actually, I think that's the only thing it'll ever receive is a number. If it picks up any other requests, such as a GPS or like one of my fueling turtles, because I had them originally programmed to set to broadcast. But what I meant by GPS is that the elevator does call GPS sometimes, and it broadcasts in order to do that, since the GPS towers don't necessarily, because you don't, you know, specify specific IDs on the GPS satellite. So it just does it throws a ping out, and so this condition right here filters those. So if it's not, so as long as it's a number, which the number would be the distance. So like if I'm on floor 3 and I click that I want to go to floor 1, I have it in my elevator itself, in its code. It knows, it does a GPS to find out its Y coordinate. and I have the coordinates of each of the floors already programmed in. So it compares its current position with the position that you want to go, gets that distance in blocks, and sends it to here. So what this will do is if the distance is positive, because of how I did the math, then it does cause the move up function. If it's negative, it calls the move down function. And of course changes it to positive when it passes it through. So and then once it finishes either moving up or moving down, it'll send a message back to the elevator letting it know that it has arrived at its location. And then the elevator can do the bing and the opening the doors and whatnot. So, and moving up and moving down is pretty much the same thing. And don't mind these comments. This is just, I experimented with a lot of different ways to get the elevator to move. And I won't go into too much detail about that. So you might see some commented code occasionally, and just ignore it. I gotta clean up this code. So it keeps a local track of the distance that it traveled. So while the distance traveled is less than the number of blocks that it needs to travel, then it pulses, it turns on light gray on real quick, and then turns it off, and then it waits. And this is what I'd been talking about that I tried to tweak to try to get it the pulse just right on the timing, and I might have to tweak it a little bit more. So, and that's really it. It increments the distance. And actually I could probably change this while into a for loop. It does the same thing, so probably doesn't matter too much. I'll have to see. I don't think it'll cut down on my code size too much, but moving up, it's pretty much identical, except the yeah, it is pretty much identical, except it pulses a different color wire to move it down. And that's pretty much it with as far as moving the elevator. It's pretty simple. So now let's go to the actual elevator itself. So here is the computer for this. Ooh, and I gotta change that. Those are just some debug messages to help me make sure that I'm getting the right coordinates. So let's look at this one. So what we got here, I'm just basically setting some simple variables. A table of just how many floors there are. This is for writing out to the panel, the buttons. The GPS, even though I stored the X, Y, and Z coordinates, really I only need the Y. I stored the X, Y, and Z because it would be really cool if I could get this elevator to move sideways as well. Sideways, forward, and back, in addition to the up and down. Excuse me, I just woke up just a couple hours ago, so I'm still a little tired. But yeah, right now I'm only using the Y. So these are just a kind of round is just to help me round the GPS position. Split, this is a split function. I got it from one of the Lua documentations. It doesn't work on its own. I have to have another function, SP, to actually call it. And I actually have a couple functions that call the split function. Basically, what the split does is when I pass a string separated by colons, it just splits them out and returns a table. So basically what I have to do is have another function to actually call that function. It takes a table and it splits the table values up into individual variables and returns those individual variables. So like this function will return two results, both of them will be numbers, and it will return the x and y. Here's one. It's a similar function. This is when an elevator, or one of the buttons outside the elevator gets hit to call the elevator to a specific floor for pickup. This splits up its specific string. And then the last one is when I do a GPS call, then this splits it up into the X, Y, and Z. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. But this function is just the simple function to, and it initially draws the floor, the button panel here. It positions them and sets the colors and whatnot, and then this gets called, you know, often. So it'll check to see if there's a floor that needs to be, that's been hit. So it preserves the colors. And I'll explain how I do that here. So what happens when you either push one of the buttons outside of the elevator or one of these buttons? Essentially what'll happen is there's a queue, and it's just a table in here. But it'll add that number to the queue. And this code basically it's doing some multitasking here. Let me go all the way down to the bottom. So this parallel, this is the multitasking. So it waits for, so put the code for, you know, the actual interaction with the buttons is one function. Moving the elevator, which is sending the request to the lift server, which I showed you a moment ago. Receiving the call request, which is the buttons pushed outside the elevator. And get key press, which is a function that I have running to where you can push any key when you're on this actual terminal to exit the program for debugging. So push buttons, as I said, well, actually, it all revolves around this queue. Push buttons will, and the call both add the floor, the requested floor, to this queue. The only difference is the push the buttons will actually color the buttons in the panel. So, and here receive call request. This is the same thing. It just adds it right here. This line. Table insert into the queue, the floor. So we got a, where's that function? I think it's this one. It's kind of a mess. I really need to clean up all my debug code. But move elevator. So all this function does is just constantly loops. And each time it loops, it checks to see if the queue is empty. And if it's not, it just loops. So once it finally sees an item in queue, regardless of how it was added, whether it was added from the buttons in the elevator or outside, once it finds that, it pauses for just a moment. And the reason it does that is, like in a real elevator, when you hit a button, there's a slight delay before the doors close to make sure, you know, everybody has a chance to get inside. That's basically what this is trying to simulate. Then it gets its current floor. I'm only getting the Y function here. It gets it through a GPS. Once it does that, it closes the doors and gives another little delay before it starts moving. And then it's okay, here's that line that I needed to, that other debugging line. I'll just comment that out. And I'll just delete those later. So what it does is it looks at that, remember that table I showed you at the top where it keeps the GPS coordinates of each of the different floors. So what this does is it looks up the coordinates of the current floor in Q. And once it finds that, it just simply subtracts that floor by the current floor to figure out the distance that it needs to travel. If that distance is not 0, meaning that they didn't hit the same floor that they're already on, then it sends the request to the lift. It just sends the number of how far it needs to travel. And then what it does is it waits. It enters in this loop here, and it waits for that lift to send it another RedNet message letting it know that it has arrived at its current floor. And then I do have one more function, which is it's almost like a duplication of what just happened, making sure we're on the right floor. Because if the server lagged or something, then there's a chance that I might be a block or two off, above or below. It hasn't happened since my recent update of the code, because I guess it's a lot more stable now. To put it, the movement is a lot more accurate. But just in case it missed the floor, then it does it pings the GPS one more time, and it checks the distance between the desired floor and the current floor. And if it's off, then it just basically pings the lift server one more time to move it. So finally, once we're certain that we're on the right floor, it'll ping light gray, which is the music box, which will make the chime. It'll remove the current item from the queue. So the floor that in case you hit multiple buttons, there's going to be more than one floor in the queue. So this will just remove the one that we just arrived at and preserve the other ones. It'll call that draw floor function again, which will update the button display. It'll color in, it'll reset the color back of the floor that we just arrived at because it's no longer in queue, but it will keep the other one's color. And then it will just pause for a moment because, in a real elevator, usually there's that slight delay once you hear that ding of the floor and the door's actually opening. And then it'll pulse the cyan color, which will activate the motors to open the door. And then it'll give a few seconds to let people get off before going back through the loop and going to the next floor in queue. If there's no other floor in queues, the door will just stay open and it'll just wait here. Oh, man, that took a long time to explain. Yeah, this is a pretty complicated program, and I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. Let me just restart this. You can see it cleared that, and now the button display. So yeah, that's how it worked in a nutshell. What I had also wanted to do, but I kind of think it's a little bit unnecessary now, is right above here, these two blocks, I was going to make them monitors and show like each floor in like a line with some space between them and highlight the floor that it was on. And then as this is moving, it would occasionally send a red it would broadcast its RedNet or its GPS coordinates to these displays, and they would actually update and highlight the color the floor was on. So like when I started this video and I hit this button, I mean, this would have showed initially what floor it was already on, and then as it was coming down, it would show me how close it's getting. The reason I didn't do that is because I noticed that a lot of elevators nowadays don't seem to do that anymore. Or maybe I'm just seeing some weird elevators, which is possible, but at least the elevators that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis don't really show the number display anymore for the floors. That seems like something that, you know, you really just see in a lot of the older elevators. And I'm just going to show you this real quick, the inner workings. So here's the gray wire with the music. These are 2 more frame motors. They're facing in opposite directions. This one I think is pointing that way, and this one's pointing towards the elevator. So when the cyan pulses, the door gets closed up to this wall. This is just a failsafe, but it should only get pulsed twice because there's only 2 blocks that need to be opened. Oh yeah, and then here's the actual buttons. It's very, very simple code here. So the difference is on each floor I have to change this number. It's a pain in the ass, and what I was originally thinking of doing is updating this code so it accepts parameters when you call it, and then just have that parameter set the floor number and just put it as the startup. But this is just me being lazy, honestly. So all this does is it finds, let's see, what does it do exactly? All it does is it just sends a RedNet request. It finds which side the modem's on, it opens it. Well, when the event, was a problem that I had to overcome, and it took me a while. So, you know, I was using those stone buttons on the front. Problem is that when you click them, it actually pulses twice. One for the in, one for the out. And this was I think it just hit the microphone. Sorry. This causes the number, like, this causes 2 RedNet requests to happen so fast that the items get added to the queue, or the same floor will get added to the queue twice, even though I do have checks to make sure, you know, that you can't add the same number to the queue. It just happens and so fast that it just seems to ignore all that. So what I did was simply, when it receives the redstone request, which is what the button pulses, but also make sure that this redstone get input right. Basically will return true or false depending on whether or not it was active. So when the button's pushed down, redstone is on, and therefore this function would return true. When it pops out, even though it sends an event, the input is off, so this returns false. So by only having this return true when it receives the event means that this will only fire when the button is initially hit. And then it just sends to the elevator itself which floor and that it was a call request. And I showed you that split function that handles that. So there is some code in there that just handles the when it was a call, and all it did was just add it to the queue, basically. So that's that. And let's see, how long did it take me to explain all that? Oh my god, it took me almost half an hour. Well, looks like that the stuff that I wanted to show you guys, I'm gonna have to save for another episode. This is all explaining my freaking elevator. Oh well. I hope you guys found this interesting, and in case you guys are thinking of trying a project like this, I hope this helped you out. So yeah, that's it for now. I'm gonna start recording my next episode. So take care, and I'll see you next time.